Well, welcome to Torah Today Ministries. My name is Grant Luton.
And I'm Robin.
And we are here to discuss Torah portion Ha'atzinu, which is just one chapter, Deuteronomy 32.
So since it's just one chapter, there's not much to say,
Not
right?
much at all. No, might as well just skip it.
Oh, I'm just smiling as we look at these beautiful words and just consider what God has said through this. It's just amazing.
Oh, I know, it's incredible. The Song of Moses. But before we get into the Song of Moses, we just want to give a shout out to all of our listeners. We had a Torah Today Ministries board meeting last week, and so we printed out some statistics. And, in the United States last month, in August 23, we had just a little under 4,000 listeners and viewers. But in South Africa, we had well over 5,000 viewers and listeners on YouTube. And so we just want to give a shout out to our South African viewers and listeners. Way to go. And throw down the challenge to the U.S. to get into gear and catch up with our South African brothers and sisters here.
There's something about our South African family that is so near and dear to our hearts. There are no words.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, these statistics are just on YouTube. But I want to encourage everyone again, please, please, please go to our website, TorahTodayMinistries.org, O-R-G. I just counted up and done over 186 teachings, recordings, interviews. And there's just a wealth of information there. You can print out notes from the other kinds of teachings. You can see the various series that have been completed and that we're in the midst of, and there are articles there and all kinds of good stuff.
And Grant, I know your heart, and this isn't about you. This isn't about us.
No, not at all.
This is about the culmination of the things that you have studied and learned and understood from Hashem through the years. And we're so humbled and grateful to have a way to just express these things that have been hidden in notebooks on your shelves for years and years.
Well, I turned 70 last year when I retired from Beth Tikkun, and it's like, it's just, I feel pressed to just kind of record as much as I can of things I've learned, that a lot of things I don't hear anyone else teaching. And just to get it down and recorded, and so people have access to it after I am long gone.
Well, that actually plays into the theme of this portion, at least in my mind it does.
It does, doesn't it?
It does, because as I look at Moses, here he is, the very end of his days.
The last day of his life.
The very last day, the very last moment of his life. And I kind of giggled as I thought, he's not looking for a place to go and play shuffleboard and bingo.
Pickleball.
And kick back and take it easy, because if anyone deserved a break from all the things that he had worked so hard to instill in God's people, it's Moses.
Yeah.
But his quality of life is rich till the very last breath he takes. And you know why? Because he was the most humble man on earth.
Yeah.
And I have come to truly believe with all my heart that our quality of life equals the degree of humility that we're able to have. And that is Moses.
Yeah. It's like someone, a long time ago, and it always stuck with me. He said, we shouldn't look forward to getting retired, but to getting refired.
Well,
he was firing.
I want to be that little old lady, if I live long, that people really want to be with, because I still have something to contribute. Yeah. I don't want to be stuck in a room somewhere watching television and, my meals brought to me and people rolling their eyes and, making themselves come and spend time with me. I want to contribute to the end, Grant.
Yes, me too.
That is my prayer. So anyway.
All right, enough of us.
Enough of that.
So the Song of Moses, we last teaching, we left you with a question about where do we finally see the Song of Moses sung? Mm-hmm. Because at the end of chapter 31, we read about how in verse 19, Now therefore write this song for yourselves. Verse 22, so Moses wrote the song the same day. Verse 30, that Moses spoke the words of the song in the hearing of all the assembly. Verse 44, that Moses came and spoke all the words of the song. And there's, I think, another place too, where, verse 30, where it says this song, anyways, I think it's 4 or 5 times. But we never see it sung. Where do we sing the song of Moses finally sung? Not until Revelation chapter 15.
Amazing.
One finally, right? The end of the word. And so we're going to get into that in just a moment. Or should we jump right there now?
Let's lead up to it and begin with talking about the name of this portion.
Good idea.
Ha'azinu.
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 Yes.
And it really means to give ear
Yes.
in a way that isn't casual.
That's right.
It's very, very intentional. And it's the act of active listening.
Yes. Yeah, ha'azinu comes from the word ozen, which is the word for ear. And so he's saying, ear me. So it's different from shema. Shema means to hear, but also to obey. And so you can shema, hear and obey something, and once it's done, you go on to the next thing and forget. But to ozen, to ha'azinu, means I want you to hear this, I want you to memorize it, I want you to rehearse it and practice it and go over it, and may it always be in your minds, constantly. And that's the word that's used here.
Well, it's not lost on me that there is another song that Moses was part of.
Yes.
And it's called the Song of the Sea. And it's right after the people had crossed over initially the Red Sea. And then we have this Song of Moses, and there's another crossing over involved.
Yes.
So describe that pattern, because it's really cool.
Right, this is amazing. There are 40 years between the Song of the Sea, back in Exodus 15, and here the Song of Moses in Deuteronomy 32. So if you go back to 40 years earlier, Israel is enslaved in Egypt. There have been 9 plagues, and it comes to Passover night. They have a Passover Seder in their homes. So it's Passover, then they cross the Red Sea, then they sing the Song of the Sea. 40 years later, they're taught a song, they cross the Jordan River, and then they have a Passover Seder. It's the same 3 events in reverse.
Like a menorah.
Yeah, like a menorah. And so in the middle, you have this 40 years. 40 is always the number of transition and transformation.
Like a journey.
Like a journey. You start at one point and you get to another point. You start out one way and you've transformed into a different person. So whenever you see a 40, it means something's going to be transformed. A caterpillar is going to become a butterfly. That's basically what 40 means.
Right.
So this Song of Moses is the culmination of everything that's gone before, and it's going to take them into the future.
Well, I can't help but ask myself the question, why a song? And what is unique about a song? And even though we don't see it sung until the culmination of all things in
Yes.
Revelation, which I can't wait to discuss this. It's going to be really exciting for people to hear how this all works together. But if you think about a song, we remember things more when they are sung. And that's why we teach our children the ABCs in the form of a song. It's why the people of Israel learned the Torah in the form of a song.
Yes.
There's a melody. So there's something deeply spiritual about a song as opposed to just a speech. The other thing, Grant, that I can't help but miss when I think about a song is that it requires more breath.
It does.
You can't sing
It's more spiritual.
unless you take deeper breaths. A singer
Yes.
knows that a diaphragm has to be exercised in order to be
Exactly
a great
right.
singer. And so, as we've talked about before, the word breath and the word spirit are the same word.
Same word.
So this is the final song
Yes.
that Moses shares. And I'm hoping that we are building anticipation
Yeah.
to look at where it's finally sung. Let's do that.
Yes, let's do it. Just a thing about music, when you add a melody to words, to lyrics, they become powerful if the melody is good. And the enemy knows this. This is why he can take some really stupid rock lyrics that nobody would ever read a second time, but he can use talented musicians to add a powerful melody to these words, and suddenly it's in the minds of every teenager out there and affecting their behavior. The music, the melody is the spiritual part that really adds a spiritual dynamic to anything. It can be used for evil or for good.
Well, this is why in so many cases, and I've actually witnessed it in a dear friend who passed a year ago of Alzheimer's, and as she lost her ability to remember names or people or events, it never failed that when we were with her and someone would begin to sing a song,
she sang right along
she
with
sang every word and didn't forget a one.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
It's not a function of the intellect.
That's
it's
right.
a function of the spirit.
It's so true. So exactly true. Okay, so let's get on to some of the details of this song. One thing, if you have a Hebrew Bible, if you go back to Exodus 15, the Song of the Sea, the words are written in a very strange way. They're written, one line will be broken into a right half and a left half with a gap in the middle. The next line will be broken into three pieces.
So it
the
kind of
right,
looks like
the middle,
bricks.
and the left. Yeah, so it looks like courses of bricks overlapping because the water stood up as a wall on either side. But the Song of Moses is not written that way. You have a right side and a left side and a clear path right down the middle.
Ooh, what does that remind us of?
It reminds us of, well, we're going to get to it in Revelation 15.
That's so cool.
Because the Song of Moses, they're going to sing the Song of Moses and the Lamb. And the Lamb makes a way for us. And so you see this clear path right down through the middle of the column that separates the lyrics on the right and lyrics on the left. And so they're both songs, but they're written in two completely different ways in a Torah scroll.
And he invites us to walk in balance between the two.
Yes, that's exactly right. Okay, anyways, you have several things to point out in this chapter. Let's get to those.
Well, one of the things is the whole idea of the rock. How many times is the word rock mentioned?
Well, God's name is mentioned 8 times, and the word rock is mentioned 8 times because God is the rock. And 8 is the number of life. He's our living rock.
And we picture a huge boulder, and a rock more than anything else, I think, really denotes and pictures permanence.
Yes.
And when you run as fast as you can into the side of a large rock, guess who has to give?
Yeah.
It's not the rock.
That's correct.
The rock doesn't budge. We have to make our way conform
Yes.
to the rock.
We conform to the rock. It does not conform to us.
It doesn't conform to us. And this rock, as we're told in this beautiful song, isn't just any rock. It also feeds us.
Yes.
It doesn't just support us. It feeds us. It feeds us with water. It
Yes.
feeds us with oil. It feeds us with honey.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you get honey from a rock?
Only if there's something living inside that rock.
And that's the whole beauty of this rock. It's alive.
Yes.
And it produces nourishment. And what better, most perfect picture
Yeah.
than this picture of this living rock? And we are called living stones.
Yes, we are.
Because we're birthed from this rock.
That's right. In verse 31, it talks about the rock that false religions build their faith on. But it says in verse 31, for not like our rock is their rock.
Isn't that something?
Their rock does not endure. But the amazing thing is, it talks about how this rock gave birth to us.
Right.
This is a living stone.
Yes.
It's in verse 18. You ignored the rock who gave birth to you. And in verse 15, if you back up, it says he was contemptuous of the rock of its salvation, of its Yeshua.
And you know, through the scriptures, this rock is alluded to in different rolls, and there are times we have to stand on it
Yes.
because everything around us is stormy and shaken, but the rock itself is the only place that
That's
isn't
right.
affected. But there are other times, Grant, that we're described as being able to be hidden in the cleft of a rock.
That's right.
And I picture myself sometimes just curling up in a secret place where no one else can get to me. And he encircles me. As a matter of fact, he describes himself as one who encircles in this chapter. So there's just so many beautiful metaphors.
Well, you know, Yeshua talks to Nicodemus there in John chapter 3 about being born again. And Nicodemus says, well, how can a man re-enter his mother's womb to be born again? Well, think about something. You just mentioned it. God is the rock who gave birth to us. And from this rock comes water, comes honey, comes oil, that we're told here in this song.
Offspring?
And yet but when we go back to God, we go back to our source and we go into the cleft of the rock. It's like the one who birthed us, we go back into him.
Yeah.
We go back to our source, we return to oneness with him.
Yeah.
That's something that physically can't be done between a child and the mother. But we're talking about spiritual principles here. And we can go back to our rock and be so what's the word I'm looking for? So embedded in him, so connected with him.
Like
we
a
go
womb.
back to our source.
Yeah.
But there's one other reference to a rock and that it's worth bringing up. It's Psalm 118, verse 22. It says, the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This is Adonai's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. So here's Yeshua. Here's the living rock, the Word that's become flesh, the rock that became our Savior. And he walked among us. He fed people. He worked miracles. All he did is lay down his life for everyone. And they rejected the rock. They rejected him. But it's all part of God's plan.
We all have a choice what to do with what he offers us. And that's pictured right at the opening of this portion, because it says, give ear, O nations, and let me speak, and let the earth hear.
Yes.
We just talked about that. The words of my mouth. Let my teaching drop as rain. And I just started to ponder the rain that falls on us. And of course, it falls on the just and the unjust, the same rain.
Yes.
But it affects us differently depending upon our state of receiving it. And if you think about rain, you and I were sitting on the porch recently, and there was this beautiful soft rain falling, and we just smiled as we realized water is never new. It's the same water that has been raining down upon the earth for millennia. There's a cycle.
There's a cycle. He recycles.
God
recycles the water.
He recycles the water. It goes to the oceans, and then it's evaporated up into the clouds.
Yeah.
It's condensed, and then it falls when it's time in just the right way as precipitation. I remember being a kid and learning about evaporation, condensation, and precipitation, the water cycle. But there's something so magical about this, Grant, because we can picture the heavens and the earth as the land and the sea. And the water that falls on us comes from a spiritual place where God knows what the earth needs. And from that spiritual place, those clouds move over and falls on the land. And then once again, they go back to their source. And then it just goes in this cycle, spiritual, physical. And that's the rain that falls upon us.
Well, I just recorded a teaching, and it just got posted here this last week on Psalm 33. And in verse 7, it says, he gathers the waters of the sea together as a heap. So those are the oceans. He lays up the deeps in storehouses. Those storehouses are the clouds. That's what the rabbis teach. These are storehouses not like where you put treasure, where you never want anybody to get in and take it. These are storehouses for like food, where the purpose is to store it up until it's necessary.
So let's think about the storehouses of his words.
He puts the storehouses of the water in the clouds, moves the cloud to where the water is needed, then drops it.
Yes.
And that's what he does with his word as well.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it truly is.
So all of this happened and all of this was provided, but in verse 6, I call it the big sigh.
Yes.
So let's talk about what I mean.
Well, it doesn't come out in any translation, but in Hebrew, in verse 6, there's just an oversized letter Hey. That's the fifth letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It's like the letter H, just
Is it at the beginning of that verse? Is it in the margin?
it's right there, the first letter that starts the verse. And it's not part of a word, it's just there by itself. And our translations pick up with the word that follows it. Is it to Adonai that you do this? But first there's this, just a large letter Hey, like God is just sighing because he's so disappointed in how his people have responded to him and how forgetful they are, how they're so prone to failure. So he's just like this big sigh, this large sigh.
And it's important to realize it wasn't a sigh of him giving up on his people.
No.
You shared something so interesting with me recently. You had watched, I think, a YouTube video, or you know what? I think it was Rabbi
Manus Friedman?
Manus Friedman. We mentioned him a lot. He's become a favored teacher of ours lately. But he talked about how when he meets with a married couple and they're going through a difficult time, there's something that he notices that is always the death knell.
Yes.
And he says, if I see a woman expressing grief and sorrow and crying, and she's in tears, he says, and if I look over and I see the husband roll his eyes in irritation and disgust, he says, I know that marriage cannot be saved.
It's dead.
It's dead.
It's dead. Because the husband will say, well, I'm not the one that caused the problems. I'm not the one who's making her cry. It doesn't make any difference. She's crying. Why aren't you reaching out to comfort her? Why aren't you reaching out and trying to do something, regardless of what the source of the sorrow and the grief is?
Even if he feels like he can defend himself, a husband's heart doesn't worry about that.
That doesn't matter.
All that matters to him is
bringing comfort to his bride.
And that's the heart of our bridegroom.
That's absolutely the truth.
So this sigh is one of not resignation. It's a sigh of, oh, my people, if only you would know how much I love you.
Yeah. Yep. So he sighs.
Yeah.
Is it to Adonai that you repay this, so foolish and unwise people? Is he not your father, your purchaser, your redeemer? Has he not created you, established you? It can also mean protected you. Remember the days of yore. Understand the years of generation after generation. In other words, look at my track record, what I've done for you. Ask your father. He will relate it to you, and your elders, and they will tell you. Mm-hmm. And it just goes on and says, why do you treat me like this? All I've done is pour out my life for you and do good for you.
So what we people tend to do, unfortunately, is turn all that blessing and richness into our own selves, and we are no longer straight, because 15 talks about how Yeshurun grew fat and kicked.
Verse 15.
And Yeshurun, help me if I'm mistaken here, it's the name of Israel that should depict one that is following straight after his heart.
Yashar means to go straight.
But what happened? They just absorbed all of this and they began to assimilate into other nations and turn their hearts toward other gods, false gods, and commit idolatry. And it says, you are grown fat and thick and sleek. You forsook God who made you. And you scorned the rock of your salvation.
Well, I mentioned before how this song is written in an odd way in the Torah scroll. For each line, you have the first half of the line over on the right, and then there's a gap, and the last part of the line is on the left. And so the line begins on the right, ends on the left, begins on the right, ends on the left. And that's the way it is until you get to this verse. And then everything's offset.
Isn't that incredible?
The lines are ending on the right and beginning then on the left section. And everything's offset. Everything goes wacky
Because it describes a people who have become self-centered.
and out of balance.
And self-centeredness is self-destructive.
Well, that word yashar, straight, is 3 letters, Yud, Shin, Resh. They're also the first letters of the word Yisrael, which can be translated straight, yashar, to El, to God, straight to God. But these people who are to be straight, they became fat, they kicked, you became fat, you became thick, you became corpulent, and it deserted God, its maker.
And their
and was
quality,
contemptuous of the rock of salvation.
And their quality of life is lost.
Oh, yeah.
Their quality of life is lost. And that is a warning.
Yeah. And so these verses stay offset until finally you get to verse 39. See now that I am he, and no God is with me. I put to death, and I bring life. I inflict wounds, and I heal, and there is no rescuer from my hand. For I shall raise my hand to heaven and say, as I live forever. And it goes on. Here the words, the lines go back to where they're supposed to be. You start on the right, the end on the left. Start on the right, end on the left. But in between, there's this turmoil. And that's the story of every life, raising every child. I think every marriage, I think almost anything. Things start off with this excitement, everything's wonderful, but then you hit this wilderness period.
It's necessary.
And things just like, oh, what's going on? And everything looks chaotic, nothing, it doesn't look like God's anywhere around.
There has to be a pattern of falling down and getting up. Falling down and getting up.
Yeah, there has to be this, after the excitement, there has to be this failure, then this transformation, and then this a re-strengthening, a renewal, and then we walk with God. That's the way God runs the world. That's the story of Israel. It's a story of each of us. It's the story of every fallen creature. So
down in verse 47, I have it underlined, for this is not an idle word for you. Moses is telling the people, the song itself has ended, but he's appealing to them, saying, this is your life.
yes.
This is your life. And once again, these are the final moments of Moses' life. And he's imparting to them the most important message he can.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
But you know what we haven't done yet?
We haven't gone to Revelation 15.
Let's do it now.
So if you're not driving a car right now, this is a good time to get out your Bible and turn to Revelation chapter 15. Chapter 5, I'm sorry, we're going to start in chapter 5, in verse 8. And we're going to look at 3 sections and then go to Revelation 15. In chapter 5, verse 8, it says that when he had taken the book, the 4 living creatures, these are the 4 creatures around God's throne, and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having each one a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the holy ones. And they sang a new song, saying, worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals, and so on. So here we see the 4 living creatures, the 24 elders around God's throne, singing a song. But they're not singing the song of Moses.
It's not this song.
No. Then you go to verse 11. It says, then I looked, I heard around the throne the living creatures and the elders the voice of many angels, numbering myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice. And we can assume that they're singing because angels around God's throne are always singing. They sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing. So now all the angels are singing, but still not the song of the Lamb.
But you can picture this building and
You can
building
picture it.
and building into a crescendo.
Yes. Then you go to verse 13. And I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea. In other words, it's the whole creation is how that could be translated. The whole creation.
Including the trees and the rocks.
And they are all singing. You can picture the trees in the fields clapping their hands.
Yes.
So the whole creation sings. To him who sits on the throne, to the Lamb be blessing and honor, and so on. So now the whole creation singing. The 4 living creatures, the 24 elders, all the angels, the whole creation. But the song of Moses is still not being sung. But you get to the end of Revelation. You go forward 10 chapters to Revelation 15. Start with verse 2. And I saw what appeared to be a sea of glass mingled with fire, and also those who had conquered the beast, its image, the number of its name, standing beside the sea of glass with harps of God in their hands. And they sang.
So these are the ones, let's
The redeemed ones.
The ones that were faithful to the end.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is the same sea of glass as back in Revelation 5. We're talking about God's throne. We've returned to God's throne room. But now the entire bride, the redeemed ones, are standing around the sea or beside the sea. And they sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, Great and amazing are your deeds, O Lord God the Almighty. Just and true are your ways, O King of the nations. Who will not fear, O Lord, and glorify your name? For you alone are holy. All nations will come and worship you, for your righteous acts have been revealed. That song there is the summation of all of Deuteronomy 32.
And the words that we read in this chapter are now put to a melody.
Yes. And we talked earlier about how lyrics are one thing, but when you add the melody, the music to it, they become powerful. They become infused with power. Well, the Song of Moses, the Torah, those are the lyrics. But Yeshua is the melody.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
So when they sing the Song of Moses and the Lamb, the words are the same ancient words of the Torah. And the teaching that Yeshua gave when he was here was basically all words of Torah. But he would put them to melody. And he infused the words of Torah with living power. He made the word alive. And so the Song of Moses finally receives its melody. Finally it can be sung. And it's not sung by the angels, the 4 living creatures, the 24 elders, or the creation. It's sung by the ones who the song is about. And those are the ones who rebelled, fell flat on their faces, the failures.
Yes, made
who've
up
been redeemed.
from all the nations.
They sing the song of Moses and of the Lamb. Moses himself failed. Because of his anger, display of anger, he didn't get to go into the land. And so many of the people came out of Egypt. They died in the wilderness and didn't make it to the land. And the ones who did make it into the land, later on, they failed. It's all failure singing the song of Moses and the Lamb.
Okay, I have to share this amazing insight that I read recently by Reb Nachman. He says that every person is required to find the little dots with himself and others in order to create the beautiful music of tefillah, or the song that God wants the world to hear. So the little dots that he's referring to are the musical notes. And the spiritually deficient person that we think doesn't have anything to offer is probably the one that highlights the beautiful voice of the one standing near him. Together, we're all beautiful.
That's great.
So he says, look within yourself and within the soul of everyone around you for those dots of music. Yeah. And even though standing alone, the notes might sound like they're dissonant or they might be off key in your own ear, when God puts us all together, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's okay. This is moving material.
It is the
It's
song.
so wonderful. Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, we see everybody singing here except for one group. We see the 4 creatures, we see the 24 elders, all the angels, all the creation, and now the whole bride, all the believers. But there's one group that isn't singing yet. Those are the nations. These are the non-believers. What do they sing?
The ones that weren't part of his bride.
Weren't part of the bride. Well, back to the Song of Moses in Deuteronomy 32, verse 43. It's the last verse of the song. And it says, O nations, sing the praises of his people. What do the nations sing? Praises of the people that they failed to be. They sing the praise of the ones who did come to God.
Because they get it now.
They get it now. and they sing the praises of the bride.
And so even they have a part to play.
Yeah. And here's the amazing thing. You know, everything is done in the context of the Lamb. All these songs, the four creatures, 24 elders, the angels, the creation, they're all singing about the Lamb. Well, here's something that's really interesting. The word for song in Hebrew is shira. And the word shira is spelled shin, yud, resh, and then the last letter is hey. It begins with shin, it ends with hey. That's the word shira, song. Well, you take that first and last letter, it spells the word se, which is the word lamb.
Oh, wow.
So the song, the shira, finds its context in the se, the lamb. And so through Yeshua, the words of Torah, the song of Moses, is infused with spiritual power and beauty and glory. And finally, when we too are infused with beauty and glory and we've conquered and we finally stand there at God's throne, we will be in a place to sing this song. We're just not equipped to yet until we stand before his throne and we sing the song of Moses and the Lamb, the lyrics and the melody. And what a day that's going to be.
What a day that's going to be.
In the meantime, we memorize the lyrics.
We memorize
learn the lyrics.
And
yeah.
we listen hard. And in just summarizing, hopefully summarizing the things that we've attempted to convey, I go to Isaiah chapter 26, the first 4 verses. And it says, "In that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. He sets up walls and ramparts for our safety. Open the gates that the righteous nation may enter, the one that remains faithful. The steadfast of mind you will keep in perfect peace because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for in God the Lord we have an everlasting rock."
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. Wow. So, yeah, there's so much packed into this one little short chapter. But this chapter is all about what has gone on, what is going on, and what will happen. And this is our goal, to sing this song of Moses and to sing it to the melody of Messiah in the world to come.
And Lord willing, next week we will be sharing our final
The last one in the series, of
episode
Vazota Bracha. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a joy.
It has been. It's gone by in a flash, hasn't it?
Yeah.
All
So,
right.
Shalom, everyone. May you be blessed during these days of awe
Yes.
as we anticipate
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur.
Yes, in a few days.
And a new cycle of life
That's
for all
right.
of us.
That's right. So until then, may God bless, and we wish you shalom.
Thank you for joining us for today's teaching. If the work of Torah Today Ministries has touched your life, please consider making a donation or sponsoring an upcoming video. As a video sponsor, you'll have an exclusive opportunity to memorialize a family member, celebrate a special event, or simply support the ongoing creation of similar content. Your tax-deductible contribution helps ensure that our teachings continue to reach all who are longing for truth. Click the link or visit our website to learn more.